World travelers know there are some things you can only buy in certain places. There are retail chains that are just specific to a single country. But some retailers have been successful in crossing international borders. So, why is that? How do some brands expand around the globe? Well, Michael Hirschfeld helps international retailers enter the US market. And today he's going to tell us how it's done right now on everything we know about retail. Hi, my name is James Cook, coming to you from Indiana. Uh, One of my favorite international stores isn't really that far away. It's barely international, but I love the Indigo chain of bookstores in Canada. Every time I go to Toronto or Vancouver, I always stop in. So that's one of my favorites. Ebere Anokute is in New York.
I am. And an international store that I like is the Little African Market in the Bronx, where my mom gets all of her Nigerian ingredients and spices that she uses to cook, really amazing food.
What was that one additive that you showed us that one time that she puts in everything?
Maggie Cube,
Okay.
Maggi.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
that's where
Which
she
is sort
gets
of
her
like
name.
it's like a bullion thing, is that right?
Something along those lines. I kind of made that connection later in life, but yeah, that's the same idea.
And Taylor Coyne is in Los Angeles.
Yeah, an international store that I like, maybe controversial, is IKEA. However, not on a weekend. It's my IKEA only during the weekdays at off hours. That's
Right.
my favorite.
Right. When you know where you're going to and you have a map to
Yeah,
get
and there
around.
aren't like 1,000 people in the store. It has nothing to do with the meatballs. I just think the design it's efficient when there aren't millions of people there. But
Yeah, you have to have a cafeteria in a store like that because you're exhausted by the end of it and you just need a
Absolutely.
respite.
I know.
Well, you're all watching Everything We Know About Retail. This is where we tell all of you everything we know about retail, 3 things at a time. Well, that's usually what we do. We're doing a break from the format this week. We're having a single conversation with one guest on a specific topic. And let's bring in our expert guest, Michael Hirschfeld.
Hey,
Welcome,
everybody.
Michael.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you so much for joining us. Michael is a vice chairman at JLL. He focuses on street, urban, and resort market retail. Michael, you have 50 years in the business.
Yes. Hard to believe because as you mentioned earlier, it means I started at about age 1. But I mean, I could show you my driver's license, so you'll know that that's not the case. But it's okay. I'm happy to live the lie.
And you, yeah, I was like, wait, were you leasing space in the womb? Is that
That's what it sounds like?
The metaverse.
right? Yeah. And so, Michael, you're joining us from New York as well. I have to ask, are you in the same office space as eBay right now? You're just in a little, yeah, you could probably see each other.
I could run and jump into his frame, but we don't need to do that. Just take our word for it.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you. All right. So we're talking about cross-border retail. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So yeah,
cross-border doesn't mean between where we are in California, does it? I know California sometimes views themselves as perhaps a separate country, but
yeah.
5th largest economy in the world.
She's buying
like that.
I noticed a little chip there on your shoulder, Taylor. No, yeah. So we're talking about international retailers. And Michael, you're mostly working with retailers outside of the U.S. when we talk about this that want to break into the U.S. market. Is that right?
Well, certainly that's the part that we started with. Okay. And I mean, I believe my partner, Steve Ferris, and I think our first cross-border client might have been the Body Shop. Right. And that probably goes back 35 years. Okay.
I don't even think them as international.
Me either.
Exactly.
Nope.
Okay. Well, and that's a good example of what can happen. Okay. And so it was about retailers wanting to come to the U.S. Okay? Not to oversimplify it, Simply put, I mean, I think total, gross retail sales in the U.S. are greater than the combined gross retail sales in Spain, Italy, Germany, UK, and Italy, okay, and France. Sorry. Uh, so you can understand the lure, okay, the opportunity for that level of business, and that's you can probably take that stat and go back decades, right? The probably the more recent driver for many brands is the access to private equity and venture capital in the US is significantly greater than it is in Europe, Asia, and the Far East. It's growing in those markets, no doubt. But we measure it probably in trillions, and they're probably still measuring it in hundreds of billions. So there are a lot of different things that make the U.S. very attractive. There is an important flip side to that coin, and when you have the benefit of a global platform like JLL, there is the ability to export. Right? And as different markets around the world have become effectively closer, I mean, everything has gotten closer. Logistics and technology has just dramatically improved the ability to do business cross borders. We have more and more clients that are asking us about being able to expand overseas. In point of fact, 9 years ago, when we sold our business to JLL, the driver for that was our US clients wanting help overseas.
Hmm.
And yes, I can figure out real estate pretty easily in California or Texas. I can even sort of figure it out in the UK because while our UK colleagues will argue my next statement, we nominally speak the same language. Okay? But cross the English Channel, okay, and I mean, I've got, I don't know, 8 or 9 years of French in my background, and I can barely understand a Frenchman. So there was a need for a global platform, and that's what JLL offered. We, in the last, I would say, probably 18 months, have surfaced work in Spain, certainly in the UK, Saudi Arabia, okay, Dubai, Malaysia, Hong Kong, mainland China. And it just the amount of exporting is growing rapidly. To say, but importing is probably still the bulk of what we do.
For sure. No, I mean, you just started to talk about some of the different areas that you work in. Can you tell us, are there certain regions where it's been more difficult to help those retailers break into the U.S. rather than others? Is that something that you've experienced over your career?
Um, the what probably makes it more difficult from region to region is how differently real estate operates, okay, in many of those regions. And for example, in the U.S., real estate in many ways is a trading vehicle. Landlord develops a property or a landlord buys a property, and they want to lease it up. And based upon how they leased it up, they're either going to sell it in the capital markets or they're going to finance it, right? And they exit. In many parts of the world, real estate is the basis of a family's wealth, right? And it doesn't trade. So, for example, it's only recently that real estate, say in London, has become more of a trading vehicle. Prior to that, I mean, you've got properties. I mean, obviously, many of them are still controlled by the royal family, but they've been in the same family for hundreds of years. So, the other part that you have, and I often have described myself, and I guess the way I would say it is, U.S. speaks real estate this way, and the rest of the world speaks real estate this way. Okay?
Wow.
Our job, okay, is to translate, okay, to get
Right.
them to understand how real estate is spoken in the U.S. And there are nuances of difference at every level of the business, right? Everything from how leases are negotiated. I think a great example is we completed during the pandemic. We actually won the business during the pandemic, completed the flagship deal during the pandemic, completed a flagship deal in Boston with a group out of Australia, Kennedy Watch and Jewelry, Australia's largest luxury watch dealer. Completed a 25,000 square foot major flagship lease on Newbury Street. And the principal of the company, fourth generation CEO, okay, has never set foot in the space. Okay. It was after the lease was signed that any member of his team was able to leave Australia. Right. So, and one of the things that was really interesting, and I've built the CEO has now relocated his entire family and his base of operations to LA. Okay. He moved to LA the moment he could get out of Australia, lived in a hotel for 4 months, just rented a house now, and is permanently locating his family office and everything in the US. And during the negotiation, the idea of an asking rent, okay, versus a taking rent, okay, was not something that he was used to. And that's not uncommon.
So
okay?
they don't negotiate rents. It's just you pay what they ask.
So I like to say, and I don't know if this is a positive or a negative, I think to some extent, one of the things that our team has done in working with our colleagues cross-border is we've somewhat poisoned the well a little bit, okay, in that we have them realizing that it's a give and take, okay? But this gentleman, and I've come to have an enormous amount of respect and actually affection for him. He doesn't get this U.S. process of setting a price here. Why don't you just say the price you want?
Yeah.
And, I mean, you think about it, you've spoken to enough retailers. If you tried to do that in the U.S. and said, no, here's the price, they would still offer you less. Okay? I mean, we sort of almost see that as the way the game is played. Okay. It's not that common in other parts of the world.
Sounds kind of nice.
There's another aspect of that which is much more technical to the brokerage world, okay, which is interesting because overseas, the idea of tenant rep, okay, versus landlord rep, okay, it means different things to them than it does to us. Take London as an example, because I think it's the best example and most analogous. A tenant will hire a broker to represent them. A landlord will hire a broker to represent them. Okay? Each broker advocates for their client. Okay? When the deal is done, each broker is paid by their client. Right? In the U.S., okay, I advocate, one of our clients is Hamleys, the iconic British toy store. We're doing major flagship deals for them, okay? I go in and I advocate and fight tooth and nail on their behalf, okay, for month after month after month, right? All I am doing is fighting on their behalf. I'm successful, okay? Virtually or in reality, we shake hands. Good job, Michael. We're really happy with this deal. I go back to my office and I send my invoice to the landlord.
Yeah. I've always thought that was a little
off. It's a little strange. Okay.
Yeah. I think the other way is better.
Well,
maybe.
Same, and also say a price, and I want that price, and we got to go. Enough of this. I like this.
There's a probably a 6 or 8 to 1 differential, okay, in revenue, which means we don't want to change the system.
I hear you.
Michael, speaking of Hamleys, since we know that you've been working with them, one would just be kind of curious to hear that. And also just, now you're talking about a toy store and a jewelry store. So what kind of retailers cross-border best, and, kind of using maybe some of your client examples and who's maybe have an easier time coming to the US?
Sure. Well, I think in a lot of ways, it depends on the particular business as well as the time you're in. Okay, so right now, and I'm sure that I mean, I know you folks have spoken about this. Luxury is just on fire. Okay, it's probably the one category that is been consistent through the pandemic. I suppose luxury and bedding through the pandemic have been two categories that just kept growing and expanding. Right. Fortunately, we have clients in both categories. And you know, one of the reasons why the U.S. is attractive, aside from obviously the large GNP and disposable income and all of that, is in certain countries these luxury business function differently. Right? For example, in certain countries, if you are a luxury jeweler, okay, and you're going to sell diamonds, say by Graph, right? In the country that you're in, you may actually have to buy that product from Graph, and you actually own the product. Okay, it may be in other countries that you can actually have an arrangement with Graph where you get the product on consignment. So each category, each sort of country can be a little bit different. Hamleys is a fascinating story. We have worked with them now for 6 years. And not that I'm terribly proud of the next statement, but I've completed 0 transactions in 6 years.
Wow.
And I'm supposedly considered good at what I do. Okay?
I've heard that.
It's a rumor. And during the 6 years, okay, they have had 4 different corporate owners. When we were first introduced to them, they were owned by a French company. Okay, the French company had acquired them many years back, and the French company was in the process of going bankrupt. So Hamleys got extracted from the bankruptcy and was taken over by a British company. Okay, so the French company had no money. The British company that acquired them, and they had stores in Britain, so it was basically almost like the original company was getting itself back. Well, they didn't have a lot of capital either. The group that acquired them were dealing with all the issues that a number of department store retailers were probably dealing with in 2016 and around that time. So they too, they had this desire to be in the U.S. Remember, the toy business in the U.S. had effectively evaporated. Okay, you had Toys R Us and FAO Schwartz. Okay, which neither was a fun place to shop. And what should a toy store be if not fun? I mean, the original FAO Schwartz, I mean, the store that I grew up in and on Fifth Avenue, that was a fun place to shop, right? Hamleys, back when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, if you went into Hamleys in London, you were able to acquire toys that you saw no place else. You didn't see them in the U.S. They weren't exported to the U.S. Just nature of the business. So Hamleys was always eyeing the U.S. as sort of, wow, okay, just such a great opportunity. Had no capital. Okay, to open up a 30,000 or a 40,000 square foot flagship store in the U.S. is going to take 15 or 20 million dollars in capex, and that's before you deal with product, just infrastructure, what you have to build out to be able to open the store. So the Brits that had it, okay, they really didn't have the ability to expand it. They had issues in some of their other businesses. So now they were acquired by a Chinese group. And when the Chinese group acquired them, we actually had a lease ready for execution. And when I say ready for execution, the last phone call that I received from the landlord of the property was a call to discuss the invites to the closing dinner. That's how close we were.
Wow.
And reading some things that were going on overnight and some financial press, I was not surprised when I got a call the following Monday saying, Michael, we've got some bad news. Okay. And we're being acquired by a Chinese group. Okay. And the Chinese group, okay, instead of approving the deal, said, why don't you present the deal to our bankers and have helped them understand it, and it was just the beginning of the end. The Chinese did acquire the company, the Hamleys, strictly to expand within mainland China. They opened up a few stores, and then the nature of how they were able to acquire the business, debt for acquisitions in China is short-term debt, right? When that short-term came around, it was now they either had to sell it, okay, or pay it off. So they sold it. Hamley's largest franchisee in the world was Reliance Brands out of India. Okay, I think maybe India's second largest company. Okay, so they acquired Hamley's, and now for the first time in all the years that we've been working with them, we have an owner that has the money. Right, but at the same time, and Reliance is one of the largest retailers in the world in terms of number of stores and volume that they do. They are sophisticated enough to realize, well, what we don't want to do in the U.S. is we don't want to have to build out logistics and infrastructure and HR. Okay, we want a JV partner who has that. Okay, we want to have skin in the game. They will invest capital. But our mission now is less about real estate, where there's plenty of big box real estate, right? Both big box traditional flagship real estate, and probably the New York, LA, San Francisco, Vegas, Chicago markets that you would want to do flagships in. Plenty of opportunities. Challenge we're having is finding that JV partner. Maybe someone's listening who wants to be the JV partner.
Yeah, for folks out there, if you're interested in opening a chain of iconic toy shops across the U.S., I have to say, I think it's a great time for toy stores in the U.S. because there's a real dearth now.
I mean, basically, you have Walmart and Target are toy stores for about 7 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so FAO has tried to come back in the city, but it's basically a bunch of shop and shops, and again, a toy store should be magical. Okay. And if you've been fortunate enough to be in a Hamleys, you realize the magic and the science behind it. Okay. Which I've learned over the years. You walk into Hamleys on Regent Street, any one of us walk in. Okay. It's a little discombobulated when we walk through the door as you walk around the store. Well, why is it discombobulating? Well, the fixtures, okay, that the product is sitting on, where you can play with the product if you're a child, the fixtures are slightly lower than any of us would be comfortable with, okay, because they're designed from a kid's perspective, okay? So you can't put a table at adult height if you want a child to play on it, okay? So it can be a little bit disconcerting. And then, I mean, the whole science behind running a toy store is just, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. We need to do a whole other show just and dig more into this. I would love to talk more about Hamleys, but we should keep it going.
Sure.
Okay. So here's a good one. You've been exposed to retail real estate all over the world. What is the place, be it a country, city, region, that was the most difficult to work in?
Most difficult to work in. I've got two answers. Okay. Italy. Okay. It's just real estate functions differently in Italy. I suppose the analogy I would use is if anyone here has watched a John Wick movie, okay,
I haven't.
Things happen under the table. That's where business gets done. Okay, and it's a line from a John Wick movie, and Italy real estate is less transparent than many other places. Right?
So we're talking about envelopes of cash kind of under the table.
That's what I'm getting.
Just less transparent.
Okay.
I mean, there's just less disclosure. Okay.
Oh, I see.
So it makes it harder at times to sort of do the due diligence that you need to do. Okay.
You don't know what the market rents are.
Yeah.
Curious, Michael, real quickly, are most of the owners in Italy, is it most of those private families like you described in other countries, or are there institutional owners there?
No, it's smaller. I mean, again, there is all over the world, more and more property is moving into fewer and fewer hands. Okay.
Okay.
It used to be in the US that when you talked about street retail tended to be a localized phenomenon. Okay. But now you go to any major shopping street, go to Lincoln Road in Miami, go to the Third Street Promenade, go to Market Street in San Francisco. You run across the same owners market after market after market. And now they're even starting to look at the smaller markets. We have major New York property owners, retail property owners that are interested in Nashville, Memphis, Boise, right? Because they're looking for opportunities and they want to look where people, haven't started to sort of drive prices up. So, and then I would say the probably, I mean, the singular most difficult one has been China, mainland China, right? Especially, and the market I've spent more time in than other markets would be Shanghai, right? Because the typical lease could be 2 or 3 years with no rights of renewal. So tenants have to come in and make this enormous capital investment, okay, with no guarantee that they're going to be able to continue tenancy. Now, obviously, when you look at how much retail has come into Shanghai and the rents that they pay, which are probably the highest in the world today, you realize that obviously they're willing to do it, okay, because you have these major luxury flagships that have been built in Shanghai and elsewhere in China. That again, like I was saying earlier about how much different real estate is spoken. Okay, that's classic example of it. Hong Kong is not too much different than that.
Wow.
I mean, I suppose in the U.S., if I had to pick the most difficult market, well, I'm more adept at it than when I first started. But when I first started doing business in the market, Las Vegas was a very strange market.
And you've got a big project in Vegas now. So what was, now I'm just thinking back to what I've seen in the movies of Vegas in the 60s and 70s. There was a certain organized crime element. Is that what we're talking about?
Really? In Vegas? Wow.
You don't say.
You don't say. Wow. I have to watch the movies you're watching. No, what?
So who played you in Casino, Michael?
The thing about Vegas, again, a lot of the retail that was inside, forum shops or inside the casino projects. So that was a little bit more traditional in terms of leasing and approach. I mean, forum shops is Simon. It wasn't developed by Simon, but became Simon. When you get out on Las Vegas Boulevard, okay, you had a lot of individual owners, people that have owned the property for decade after decade after decade, and again, it was I suppose they like to deal with each other as opposed to dealing with outside firms, right? And the local brokerage firms and the local owners they socialized together. They belonged to the same clubs. They lived in the same neighborhoods. As developers came in who started focusing on retail, such as our client, which was a New York developer, they started bringing in a more sort of traditional type of leasing approach, hiring a firm like a JLL or the other large firms are now in the market too, and it started sort of rocking the boat a little bit. And we're fortunate in that the project that we're involved in, which I guess we've now been involved with since 2014, okay, and it's gone through a series of phases, and we're just going into the final new construction phase, which is a 300,000 foot phase. Our project is pure retail. It's only retail. It's retail and F&B. Okay, it doesn't have and it doesn't touch the goose that lays the golden egg. Right? Since we don't touch casino and we don't touch gaming, okay, we are viewed a little bit more benignly. Okay, and we've been very respectful of that. I mean, there have been plenty of opportunities where people have come to us and wanted to do things that would be gaming related, and we just our client just won't do it. So that's a little bit of, if you're going to do something like that, you better have the right connections.
Gotcha. So for retailers, international retailers that are coming to the US, if you were to give them some advice, what's the key to success? Obviously there's a lot of keys, but what's the elevator pitch of what do you got to make sure you do if you're coming into the US as an international retailer?
Well, I think the key thing is small bites. Okay, come in and again, you may be a giant company, but you're coming into a new market with again, consumers' behavior is different, construction is different. So don't think you're going to have, or don't even try to have 50 stores in 2 years, right? Do a couple. Okay, and again, whether you're a big space user or a small space user, find the two markets that are most analogous to where your most successful stores have been. As all of and obviously through our through the JLL GIS people, you can draw a lot of analogies between pretty much any part of the world in the US, and we can match profiles pretty well. So start small, okay? Kind of build the right team, build the right legal team, build the right logistics team, build the right construction team, get people that you can rely on. And yeah, you may only do one or two stores in your first 18 months. Once you've got a feel for it, then you can ramp up, and you can ramp up very rapidly at that point. One good thing about the US real estate market, as more and more property has gone into fewer and fewer hands, once you know what works, and once you know what format works and what type of property, are you a regional mall tenant? Are you a street tenant? Are you a lifestyle tenant? Or is your business maybe really better for outlet centers? Right? Once you know what it is, you can get with the major developers and develop a portfolio rollout for a period of years. We do that with many of our clients. We're talking to the major shopping center developers today about stores for 22, 23, long-term 24, right? And if they have new projects that maybe are looking at 25, we could be looking at as much as 3 to 4 years.
Thinking about the future and the fact that people are starting to travel again and explore places around the world, and it's a very exciting time. Tell us which city can be a district as well. You don't have to, what does retail the best? And it could be a district within that city, like I said, or city as a whole, but globally, where is the best?
Globally or US?
Globally.
Global. I mean, I think that the cities that have always been of interest are the ones that are going to see renewed interest, mainly because people haven't been there in 2 years. So, I mean, if you want to go do fashion shopping, I mean, I would hop on a plane and go to Milan. Okay, walking around Milan and walking around those streets, I think is it's even if you're not buying, it's a wonderful experience. I think staying in Italy for the moment, I think Florence is a lovely city. London, London has new districts emerging the way our major cities have districts emerging. Spitalfields has sort of come along and it's been around for a while, but new developments, for example, at Battersea and Battersea Station. I think Zara just announced a flagship going into Battersea, I want to say yesterday. Okay. So a lot of those areas that were coming along have now started to show a lot more growth. And I think as people come back, that energy will translate into more deals. Barcelona, I was just in Barcelona last week for a day. It's just reopening, okay, and it has an amazing food and beverage scene developing. Okay, it's always had a nice art scene and sort of a very nice university scene, but it's really now developing some interesting F&B concepts. I think parts of Germany, Hamburg, Frankfurt, okay, are really seeing some growth and some energy in a positive way. Um, I have to say I'm not that well versed in Scandinavia, okay, but I know clients of ours have done recently done deals in Copenhagen. So I think there's a lot of those cities are also showing growth. I think you've got obviously Eastern Europe right now has its own set of challenges, and it I think to some extent that's actually going to drive more business to look at the U.S. to have more retailers look at the U.S. Whenever there is turmoil, economic or geopolitical, the U.S. gets perceived as a safe haven. Right? And I think that uh, we're going to see capex get directed here that might have been going someplace else. Russia was never that relevant. I think on the retail side, okay? It was more of a franchise market than a direct operating model. So I think that there's also and it's a complex market, and I'll use the larger market, the Gulf Coast. Okay, and what we've been doing some work in Qatar. We've done work in Dubai, both import and export. Saudi Arabia is going through a large transformation with investment, not without its own challenges, but seemingly, if you get through the social aspects of it, it's a market with tremendous demand for goods, and that should be another one that people take a look at.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I mean, those all sound fascinating. I've been to some, haven't been to all of those places, but they're all on my list.
I'm going to say the first two were part of our big 2020 Europe trip. We were supposed to go to Italy and London. So this is just a reminder to get it back up
Book
there.
it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we are out of time. Michael, I've learned quite a bit. I really appreciate you coming on and joining us, and we're going to have you back again to do another follow-up discussion. I feel like we should do a New York specific discussion because that's the market really well because you live there.
Absolutely.
It's you know what, when you mention that, and in the context of cross-border, I remember, I think it was 1974, maybe five, okay, that Roberta Camerina was an Italian fashion retailer, known if you traveled to Italy, not known if you didn't, okay? They came in and paid $100 a square foot for the corner of 51st and Fifth Avenue.
Wow.
And everyone said they have to be out of their minds.
Wow.
Okay? I mean, and granted, okay, I'm going back, into ancient history, okay? That the same space that they rented recently just did a short-term renewal of an existing tenant, okay, at about $2,500 a square foot.
Right.
And that's actually not from Fifth Avenue's peak of 4,000. So,
right.
But that was something, and not to have you folks run over, but back then you had retailers that came in that no one had ever heard of. Social media platforms like the ones you folks have, you don't see as much of that anymore.
Right.
You do find things that are new to market, but they're not unknown to market.
Right.
So,
yeah. All right. Well, to be continued. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk again soon. So, I was just realizing we asked Michael what his favorite shopping place was. If listeners or viewers want to know what ours is, they should listen to the latest episode of Where We Buy, where we answer that very question. It's our special 200th episode where we turned the focus on ourselves and did it about what it's like to be a retail researcher and talked about fun places we like to shop. Check it out. It's on whatever podcast app you listen to. Just search for Where We Buy or go to wherewebuy.show.
Absolutely. And also be sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and click on the little bell icon so that you're notified when new shows come out each week.
You can also follow the JLL retail page on LinkedIn. We will be back next week. New episode is next Thursday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. You can find that on everythingweknow.show or on the JLL retail LinkedIn page. Make sure to tune in. We're going to be talking about sustainability and climate and what retailers are doing.
Absolutely. So, Taylor, we're talking about international retail. Tell me, what are some of the trends that we're seeing in retail in Scandinavia?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. That is my specific focus. But I'm going to tell you all of that next week.